I'm good with letting people in if you feel ready, Melissa.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then, Melissa, go for it once you hear the recording message.
All right. Good morning. As we continue, and when I say we, I mean totally, Megan and her team continue to let folks in. Just wanted to welcome you and thank you for attending our systems improvement team this morning. For some of the licensing specialists, it's good to see you guys again. We've already had one meeting from 8:30 to 9:30, so they have been very busy this morning. And so it is nice to see everybody again, but in a different venue, and really super excited about getting feedback from you as we really work on formulating what we want our engagement sessions to look like because they should be for the people and about the people. So doing the work. And so we definitely want all of your inputs and so that we can, and I see this as an evolving process. So what I expect in Abilene may not be the same for the next session. So really want to keep that as an open mind as we move through this process. That we are going to pivot, we're going to have lessons learned. And so what we decide today might be the beginning of a framework of what when we come full circle in the summer of 2025 might look very different. But let's celebrate today. Feels like fall. This has been a great week. It finally feels like it's a transition time. And so this is a great time to transition into what we want to discuss this morning. So I'm going to pass it over to Megan, and she's going to be our facilitator this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Melissa said, I think people are really enjoying the fall weather, so I hope you've had a chance to get outside and enjoy it a little bit. We have a pretty full agenda this morning. We have a few early childhood updates and then also want to open it up to member updates. I know last time we were a little tight on time, but for those who are new, we always try to hold a little space for if you have something you want to share, like an upcoming event, a new program or resource, or just a bright spot that you want to celebrate. There is so much information flying across our system at all times, and I think it's important to take a minute and be able to make sure people have a moment to just stop and pause and hear it and also celebrate what's going well. So we'll do a few minutes of that. And then, as Melissa said, we're going to really focus on the regional roundtables and would like your feedback on some things as we plan for the Abilene session, which is in just about a month. So a big update for Kansas is if you have not heard, the Kansas Children's Cabinet Trust Fund was awarded a new preschool development grant funding. For anyone who's not familiar, you'll grant. Essentially, it's federal funding. This is the fourth award for Kansas, and it's really focused on building early childhood systems. So it's a very broad grant. It does everything from work related to childcare to developmental health to just general systems governance and alignment to early intervention, like all different things. So there's a lot of different organizations that are doing work on this grant, and we just wanted to highlight because it's just a big deal for Kansas. We were fully funded, which is a rare thing in federal grants, and it's about $7 million per year. It's a 3-year grant, so $21 million overall coming to Kansas. So wanted to stop and share that. We will be getting a lot of information out about that, specifically about things that are really relevant to this group. There's a fair amount around childcare, workforce, and things that I think will be of interest, but we're just kind of getting ducks in a row, and we'll be sharing information about that shortly. But also wanted to highlight this. I think there were somewhere between 25 and 30 states eligible to apply, and 10 states, including Kansas, were funded. So again, it's really a testament to the work that I think you all and our partners across the system have been doing for many years to lay the foundation. And I think the grant will be a really nice addition to just keep building on those efforts. So again, more to come. But if you have specific questions about the grant, feel free to pop them in the chat. But yeah, stay tuned. And I hope you, if you didn't know, I hope you can celebrate a little bit because it's an exciting time for Kansas. That's our main update. Are there any member updates that anybody wants to share?
Hi, Megan. This is Amanda Peterson at KSDE. I was grabbing my visual aid. Many of you have already received your hard copy of the Kansas Early Learning Standards in the mail. We are really excited that the first batch of those went out, and we've got more of them here at the agency in English and in Spanish. So if anybody is interested in hard copies of the Kansas Early Learning Standards, we have those, and we're also adding to the kels.ksde.org website all the time with more resources. So thanks for everybody who's working on that. I'll drop that link in the chat, and if you're interested in hard copies, you can send Natalie McLean an email.
Perfect. That is exciting, Amanda. Thank you. And I was just going to ask how to get a hard copy because I imagine people might want that. So we will definitely put Natalie's information in our notes for anybody that wants to share that with their networks. Congratulations. I know that was a lot of work to get there. Any other updates?
And I'm going to put a plug in because I know some of our Casita folks have a prior commitment, but many of us just also received a hard copy of the Kansas core competencies, which I see as a complement to Amanda's share. So it's good to see that we have updated new standards across the states in the early childhood realm. So if you have not received a copy of that hard copy also, please reach out to, there's a spot on Casito's website, Linda Logan, and I just have to put in a selfish plug because I was a member of that core competencies team at the tail end, and I know they worked really hard. So I think it just speaks to the testament of our state when you see two updated resources come out at the same time, and the commitment going for young children.
Last call for any member bright spots or announcements. All right. Well, as always, we are happy to share if you have resources, events, anything like that. If you want to share that with the group, feel free to share at the weekly or at the monthly meetings. But you can also always email me or Bree Houston from our team just to we can get that out to everybody. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of our time really just getting your input on what this first regional roundtable should look like. So just as a reminder, the idea for this is a public conversation. Anybody can attend in the community, really about like what's working well around childcare licensing specifically, where are their pain points, and kind of how can the state help address them and support communities. And so we will here through October of next year, and then in the interim months, we will come back together and share what we heard at those events, and this group will really help craft like what to do with that information. So the first roundtable is scheduled for November 12th in Abilene. I know several people reached out about volunteering for Abilene as well as their own region. So thank you. We will be in touch for everyone who is interested in attending the the one on the 12th. And then for the other regions, we will be in touch about that soon because we want to start thinking about our next locations and dates before long. I'm going to share a draft flyer in just a minute. We need to make some edits to that following this conversation, but we will be sending that flyer out and would very much appreciate you all helping promote the event. If you can send it out via email, it's like a PDF or a JPEG to your networks. If you can put it on social media, any of the above, if we can do anything else to help make that easy, let us know. But we would really appreciate, particularly if you are in that north central region. And then we'd love to see anybody who is in the general area, even if you don't live or work near Abilene, that's fine. We'd just love to see the CCSIT members represented at the event. And again, it is completely open to the public. We are most hoping to see families that are actually using childcare in the area, as well as professionals serving them, and just community leaders that are invested in childcare. But it is open to anybody who is interested, and we're hoping for good attendance. So one thing we wanted to get your feedback on is we want to, as Melissa said, we are really open to these looking different in each region of the state. I think both in terms of what we learn from kind of the format and what's working well and what might need to be tweaked, but also we know there are differences in each region of the state, and we don't want to take a blanket approach of assuming that everybody has the same needs. This is really about understanding like what makes North Central Kansas's needs different than Southwest Kansas's needs. And one thing I think that I've heard Melissa and her colleagues talk a lot about is, we hear a lot about like a childcare crisis, and I think we can certainly agree there's a lot of work to be done to address childcare, but that may look very different in different communities. And so one of the goals of these conversations is to understand, like, if people feel there's a childcare crisis in their community, what does that actually look like? Because in parts of the state, that might be there's a crisis because there's not enough care for people who work like the third shift. There's not enough facilities that are open during those hours. For other people, it might be there's not enough providers. Like you all know this, it looks different in different parts of the state. And so we really want to be able to dig into the specifics so that we can have really like targeted responses to it. So all of that is to say we'd like to have a little bit of a heads up of what people might be thinking going into these conversations. Of course, there's room for what people, if people aren't able to do a survey ahead of time, that's fine. But these are some of the questions we were thinking about just sending. We have a basic registration form on the invite. If people show up and don't register, that's totally fine. But just sending a couple quick questions about like what's working well related to childcare, or what are the top three biggest needs. So we want to get your opinion, like, does this feel right? We want it to feel easy for people. Do these feel like the right questions? Is there something, if you were attending these events, like what would you want the facilitators to know ahead of time? Let's stop there. Feel free to come off mute if you have thoughts or put them in the chat.
Some of the things I thought about was what you mentioned, care outside of the normal hours of 8 to 5, although, we don't work 8 to 5, we work longer hours. I think also infant care maybe. And then one thing I think is not talked enough about, matters what circle you're in, but the high cost of child care for families is some of the things I think could be talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Emil.
I think those are all good points for from the parent side of things. I would add on the provider side of things, maybe some access to how they could access mental health in their communities. I think that as we're dealing with more and more kids that have higher needs and more behavioral challenges, there's kind of that barrier, at least I found in my county, recently, getting parents connected with the right services for their own children, but then also when providers are dealing with those higher needs children because they can't get them into where they need to be so they can get their support. I think sometimes it wears down on the providers, and I think that that's one of the reasons too that we have a lot of providers leaving the field, just for that lack of mental health support in general, knowing where they can plug in. So it'd be interesting to see if, I don't know, if we could figure out a way to direct providers to where they could find
Yeah,
some support
absolutely,
in that
Melissa.
area.
And actually, I will tease that mental health support for families and providers is an emphasis in the new preschool development grant. So there is, I mean, I think it's still a big gap, but there is some effort coming pretty quickly on that. So, but that's a great point, and I think that really highlights the what families may feel are the biggest needs and what providers may feel are the biggest needs may not be the same, and they're all I think equally important. So I think we have a pretty big spectrum of what might come up in this conversation. Yeah, I appreciate both of your perspectives, particularly as providers.
I have a question or maybe a comment, excuse me, on the pre-event survey. You know, and I'm assuming this will be included, but maybe the first question, just to identify broadly, you know, if it's a child care provider or a parent, a community member. So, because it's sometimes interesting to me to see, you know, a child care provider's what she thinks are the biggest needs might be different than a parent or a business person. So maybe just the most basic of demographic information to collect with that pre-event survey would be helpful to see where the different areas feel those needs are.
That is a really good point. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I think we could do a simple, like, you know, check if you're a childcare professional. Yeah, I think that's the most pressing needs are. So yeah, thank you for that.
Megan, I'm going to be selfish as the systems improvement team is set forward to support licensing and look at a childcare licensing perspective. I'd like to know and understand our engagement. You know, are we providing our providers and with the tools that they need? Are we providing the customer service? We are a regulatory program, so meaning that there will be violations that are noted. You know, what did that look like? I would like to see where we're exceeding and what we can do better.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to shift us forward because we'll also get into some of the agenda, and I think some of this is covering both. But I think this has been really helpful to hear just the need to kind of understand who these thoughts are coming from and how we can best respond to them. Okay, so we have a draft invitation, and Melissa and I were exchanging some emails yesterday because we feel like the language is just not quite right, and we're not sure why. And so we wanted to bring it to you to see what you think. I think a couple of questions that we have are, in general, like what feels good about this and what doesn't. And then we've kind of gone back and forth on tables or childcare regional roundtables. I think that makes a difference. And I'm really curious from your perspective, what would feel you know, I think there's on the one side, childcare licensing helps note that it is a more narrow focus, and we're going to talk about some rules of engagement in a minute around how are going to try to set people up to understand that. But also, we know that there are a lot of needs related to childcare that might extend beyond that one word makes a difference. The statement that we're kind of most struggling about 2/3 of the way down, where it says, are you a childcare pervasive enough? Do we want to just say like open to the public? Do we want it to feel more targeted to certain people? So I'm just very curious, what can we do to
when
make
I
this?
look at that, it makes me think, I mean, I see right below it, it says this event is open to the public, but in the mustard colored thing, are you a child care professional, a caregiver for a young child, or interested in the status of child care in your community? Something like that might make it feel a little more inclusive. I mean, you've got below that the public, but maybe, those people that are wanting to be helpful, especially I'm thinking like childcare coalitions that are already up and running. That might be, add something to that little box and yellow.
Absolutely. I think you're right. The event is open to the public kind of gets hidden a little bit. Melissa, does that feel better to you? Like having kind of, are you a childcare? We could do even are you and do bullet points, childcare professional, caregiver for a young child, interested in learning more about the status of childcare in your community, something like that. Does that feel like it hits our target audiences?
I think it hits it. We're starting to narrow it down a little bit better. This just didn't feel like the right engagement. And I was looking at I was trying to draft new words yesterday and they were just new verbiage and the words were escaping me. And so I appreciate feedback. Does anybody else have anything else that they recognize that cared to get the audience that you believe should be at the table?
Something like, are you invested in your area childcare? Or because I agree, I think everything that's been said, that the mustard colored is like focusing on people working, and then very small, it's open to the public. But if we're wanting to get their, I'm just not sure on the wording.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if we put like this event is open to the public, perhaps in that mustard box, and then below kind of have some examples of, yeah, I mean, and it's really anybody, like, whether you work, like, I think we definitely want families who are consumers of the services, and then absolutely we want, I mean, really anybody who's interested or invested in childcare, which could be a variety of people. What about, does anybody have thoughts on like the name of this? Does childcare regional roundtable or childcare licensing regional roundtable, do those feel different to you?
I would take licensing out because,
Okay.
I mean, the one thing that I love about our systems improvement team is it is a robust group of professionals who care about children and the early childhood system in general. And then if we have a suggestion that may be more appropriately go with any of our partners on this table, we're going to pass that on. So we don't want it to be just from our lens. It's anything that we take in that's a part of the system that may or may not impact licensing. So I like that that suggestion from Angela. Remove the word licensing.
And yes, Bethany, so your note about the picture guy, I think we can make the text a little bigger. Is there anything else on here that doesn't feel right? There, like I said, there is that little QR code. There's a really quick registration site, so we would build the kind of if they don't register ahead. what needs to be edited. We will get this updated and then get it out to you pretty quickly so that you can start sharing it. All right. And then there's going to be quite a few words on the next couple slides, but I'm just going to run through. We had talked about kind of like what are the rules of engagement? How do we both encourage conversation about kind of broader childcare issues, but also like help people see there is ideally like a narrower focus or somewhat narrower focus to this conversation. So the draft rules of engagement that we have are we welcome any thoughts you'd like to share about the early childhood system in Kansas, but we also acknowledge that this team functions within the childcare licensing branch of KDHE. The scope of what we can directly address is limited childcare licensing and regulations. Feedback shared about the early childhood system will be triaged to the appropriate agency after this meeting. So we want people to understand, like we will hear broader system level things, but just noting that those agencies may not be in the room, but certainly we can pass along information. So I'm going to run through all of these. If anybody has thoughts or feels like something is not hitting correctly, just pop it in the chat or come off mute. Practice speaking about yourself and your own experience rather than speaking for others. Be willing to new ideas and understand different perspectives, assume the best from each other, focus on challenges that are relevant to your broader community and region, and focus conversation on how we can make things better. And we'll probably we will just share these briefly. I think a lot of these are pretty common practices, but we definitely want to make sure that that we're getting the most out of the conversation that we can have. And then the last ones are everybody's voice matters, be respectful, and use examples that are timely and relevant. And I think we really want to make sure this is not talking about any experiences with specific licensing specialists, with specific organizations, or, I'm currently struggling with a regulatory requirement. I mean, I think, I think we can all imagine some of the conversation that could come up. So just want to kind of set the tone that these are, there's space for a lot of things that people want to bring up, but this is really about like, what are bigger regional or at least local issues and not individual family issues or provider issues. Do those feel, I know it's quite a few rules, but does that feel like kind of what people would expect? Yes, absolutely, Nicole. I think we can definitely look at, simplifying the language. I think we probably need to tighten some of the language too, just so it's kind of quick and easy for people to understand. Yeah, exactly. More direct. Yeah, we can definitely do that. Angela, we could be more direct on what we are wanting and participants know exactly what they're contributing. I agree. I think that's something we should definitely send out. Probably at the top of the meeting, we can include that, but we can also, I'm a fan of giving people a little information before they come to a meeting, so they just kind of know what to expect and how they want to show up. So I think we can also share some of these things ahead of time with anybody that does register. And
I was going to say, maybe could something go out with their registration confirmation or a follow-up that says, here's what we want to focus on during these meetings.
Absolutely. Yep. Any other thoughts on the rules?
Do we also want to, so this is beforehand and this is also, but we also want to make sure that maybe somebody wants to participate and listen, but they have an opportunity to provide written feedback. They may not always feel as comfortable in the group setting, sharing their opinion, especially, we don't know who's going to be attending, and but we still want to value their voice. So part of the roundtable discussion, does it mean that the discussion is limited to just being there in person, but if they provide written feedback or go home that evening and say, oh, I wish I really would have said this. This is really what matters to me, that the department is open to that ongoing conversation. It's not limited to just that one point in time of the roundtable. That's important to me, that those voices that are there that may not feel as comfortable sharing still have a voice, if that makes sense.
100%. Yes, I think that is definitely something as we promote, and that's a good note to, yep, exactly. Angela, you both, Angela and Dana both took the words out of my mouth almost. I think we can put that on the flyer too, because some people just may not be able to attend. Like we tried to pick a time that would work. We know that a Tuesday night is just not going to work for everybody. And I think also to your point, we've all been in a meeting where we didn't feel comfortable, or it's going to be an evening after a long day and you're going to be driving home and think, oh, I wish I had said that. So we can put that link all over the place. Melissa, do you want that to be anything beyond the comment form that you have online, or is that the best place?
Well, I want this separate because we're not tying it into licensing. So we have an inquiry form. So I'm wondering if that can be compiled in a different way so that it is outside of the scope of this is our inquiry form, this is licensing. These are things that are very driven by business operations within our program. This just feels a little different, and I want it to be safer for anybody and not be confused with that. So could we look at exploring different ways to gather that information, Megan?
Yeah, and you and I can chat offline, but I think we could set up a
Okay.
comment form. So we have, like, Nicole, the question about a virtual option, I think have really wanted this to be in person just because that's not always the same experience. But I think that's a good question of like, let's see how it goes. And if that seems to be a barrier, then maybe particularly as we get more into weather, like that might be something we want to think about.
Well, and also this type of conversation, I realize is hard to do virtually because if you've got a big room full, hard to microphones, hard to get the sound right.
Right.
So I realize that could be challenging, but or maybe a summary of what was discussed being published somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So the plan is to bring all the information back to this group to share. And then we also have our team at CPPR is going to work on some sort of like summary. And it might be, I think we can do a written summary, but we're also toying with the idea of if anybody's looked at the new All In for Kansas Kids needs assessment, there are like regional profiles. And so we're toying with the idea of, can we create like a regional childcare profile? So we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And I think, again, it might look different and from Abilene into the next one, but absolutely. I think a big goal of this is to share back information with people who attended and people, just the public in general, so people can feel like they have access to this information. So yes, there will definitely be documentation. And I saw Melissa just drop in the chat, we can explore a virtual option later. I totally agree. I think we need to just do a couple of these and see. And if we're hearing from people, this is a barrier. Of course, we want people to be able to attend. So, and I think in terms of recording, it's tricky because it's like we want people to know, but also I think we want it to be a safe space where people sometimes say less if they feel like they're being recorded. So, having that summary where we can highlight high level without with also giving people a little bit of comfort of it not being directly tied to them, if that feels better. But yes, just to close the loop on how we will work on a separate comment form and get that out to you too. So you can call if you know of anybody who can't attend, get that out. Okay, and then this feels a little bit duplicative, but the draft agenda is just kind of a welcome and introductions. We will have our KDHE staff in attendance, and so want to set the tone of who's in the room and really why, like what the purpose of this is, how that information is going to be used, and I think this will be really important to highlight how information will be shared back to attendees and the broader community. And then based on the survey results that we get, we can kind of focus in these questions, but our thought is we just have a few pretty simple questions to open the conversation and essentially what's working well and why is something working well when it comes to childcare. I think that's an important piece of like sometimes things work really well in one part of the state and not another state, and it's because of the people in the room or just there's something unique about that community that's making it work. What are the biggest needs related to childcare? And then how do you know this? I think again, to kind of that big question of like, what are the gaps in your community? And is that a shared gap? Is that something like, how do we know what the biggest challenges are and prioritize kind of where to try to make some positive change? And then I think specifically, how can childcare licensing better support your region? Again, we anticipate there are going to be things that come up that affect other organizations and agencies in the system, and we'll make sure that that information is shared with them. But I think we want to focus on where can there actually be some actionable solutions. So I think it's like a balance of we want people to know what to expect and feel like they understand what's being asked of them, but we also don't want to like have too specific of an agenda and have some room for conversation. So I think the point about like language, we will definitely go through this and just make sure it feels simple and understandable and direct on all of our materials, and that people feel like they kind of know what to expect coming into the conversation. Are any other thoughts on the agenda or just any of how we are planning to set this up? Does this feel a good starting point?
I think the word that comes to mind when we have these engagements that I really am going to strive for is, does it feel authentic? Like I want folks to attend and have a seat at the table and not just be heard and then put in a book and notes and just pushed aside, because I think that's how sometimes some of these handle or might be handled in the past, or that's the perception. And so anybody from the systems improvement team that's there, and then from our agency, from the top down, we're going to strive to have a really authentic engagement and be vulnerable and hear things that are both positive and where there's room for improvement. And I think and this could be from multiple lenses and views and shared with other agencies, because there might be comments and we need to move forward to another group. But I just really want us to be the two words that I'm really looking at is the authentic and the vulnerable. Should set the tone for our discussion.
Absolutely. Melissa, I'm curious your thoughts about Angela's comment in the chat.
Angela, I appreciate your comments, but that will be one that we'll take and tailor to our leadership and our communications team. So please keep putting in suggestions because those are important. But they know that some of those will have to be vetted to a group higher than the authority that's sitting right here today. So especially with our communications team. But you should just the same that we want these engagements to be authentic and provide suggestions. Please, as systems improvement team members, please continue to drop suggestions into the chat.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate how this group is thinking about how not only how these conversations can go when they happen, but like, it's hard to get a group of people together to have a conversation, and how can we really maximize what we're learning from these conversations and share it with different audiences so that we're having like collective conversations about what needs to happen with childcare in different parts of the state. So I appreciate you all thinking well beyond the actual event.
I had something that it was kind of, I don't know if it applies here or not, but I've been thinking about, and I've just finished the book by it's Dr. Dan Laurie, and he's the one who came to Kansas, and he's just written a book, and it's called The Daycare Myth: What We Got Wrong About Early Care and Education, and What We Can Do About It. And one of the things he really stressed is that we have to start seeing childcare as early care education. And so when you had the flyer that you were showing, to think, to be so bold to have it say early child education / childcare, that until we start seeing ourselves as teachers, as early childhood regulators, that others aren't going to see it that way. The book was very interesting, but I want to start presenting ourselves that way. So I don't know if we could be so bold in the flyer to say, but that for us to start seeing ourselves, not only, he says, his hope is not only to quit saying daycare, but he hopes that we quit using the term childcare. I don't see us there yet, but we've got to start taking some baby steps with that. And I would recommend the book to anybody. It's very interesting.
Now, can you drop that in chat if you get a chance?
Okay.
Or email it later and we can add it to our notes?
Okay.
That's a good point, and I think there's definitely space in the flyer to do both, so that people, because I think part of that is like, as you're changing language, like helping people understand what you're trying to say. But I think that's a good point, and definitely something we could put like early child professional and kind of the list of people that might be interested in attending. And yeah, I imagine other people would be interested in that book. So. Other questions or thoughts? I'm just catching up on the chat here. I think so, no. Derek or Melissa, do you want to respond to Adrian's question about letting legislators know about meetings in the area?
Derek may or may not be still on. He is en route.
You hopped on?
Yeah, he might have hopped. I think he hopped off. He is on his way to Orlando. We are attending a conference this week, and so he is probably boarding and getting ready to take off. But Adrian, to address your question about are we going to let legislatures know? It's open to the public, and dissemination is far and wide, so they are more than welcome to attend. Our first session will be after the election, because there will be several new seats in Kansas. So everybody's welcome to be a part of our team to understand what is going on in the early childhood process, or in the early childhood, what I like to say, ecosystem within our state. So yeah, they'd be open, and the timing is perfect for anybody new into a legislative role, or those who are not new, but just feel just as passionate as we do. Because again, it's open to the public.
that is it for our agenda, unless other people have thoughts. So if you do, just go ahead and come off mute or pop them in the chat as we're wrapping up with dates. But just a reminder, the Abilene roundtable is on the 12th. We will get the updated invite and get that out very quickly, because I know the 12th is going to be here before we know it. So just a reminder, we will not have a full group meeting in November because of the roundtable. We will in December on the 17th. And we will be able to come back and say, here's how it went in Abilene. Here are some of the things that we want to talk about, like what to do with this information, and then also start planning for our January. So between now and the next time we see the full group, we will have a date and location picked for January. So stay tuned for that. And again, we will reach out to anybody who volunteered to help with Abilene and other regions as we get closer to those. So thank you all so much. This has been a very, very helpful conversation. And I feel like this is enough to get us going. And I think, as Melissa said, we're aiming for authenticity and also some vulnerability. And it's always really exciting when we do things like this. It's also can be a little overwhelming, I think, to just not know what's going to happen. But I think that is very much aligns with the spirit of what Melissa and Derek and Jarvis and their teams are going for. And I just have to give them kudos for taking on that vulnerability, because it can be a little scary, but I think it's also a really good thing, and it's important for our system, and it's important for everybody in Kansas that has an interest in childcare to have a space to be able to share their voice. So I'm excited to get these going and see how it goes, and we'll let you know in December. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap up? I know we've got some the time. It is it's in the evening. I think it's 6:30 to 8. I knew it was 6. I knew it was 6 something. 6:30 to 8 p.m. So again, we know there's just no time that works perfectly for everybody, but hopefully that works for the majority. All right. Last call for any additional thoughts. We'll be able to give you some time back in your day.
Thank you all for attending and being a part of this process. And really, your words are so appreciated.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. We will be in touch with follow-ups. And again, thank you so much if you can help promote this anywhere in your networks. We appreciate it. And we are excited to see hopefully some of you in person on the 12th. And if you think of anything else, feel free to email me or our team for the CCSIT. And